Wonderful. Thanks so much for the introduction, Aaron. Excited to be here. As Aaron mentioned today, we're talking about how to build your brand on social media. So a lot of this comes from working with the best brands from around the world, Fortune 500 companies. And today we're sharing some practical tips that hopefully you can apply in your own business. Now there's a Q&A, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me there. Otherwise, connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions you have. Now, I've developed a structure when it comes to growing brands on social media using content. And let's start with the first C. The first C is around credibility. So, in order to build your audience, they have to trust you. Now, I know you hear that a lot, but it's extremely important when consumers are becoming more skeptical about different brands and individuals. The second is conversation. So, how do you create conversation? How do you create content that sparks a conversation with your consumers and audiences? And the last is conversion. So, how do you actually convert your audience into customers? Now, for the sake of today's, we only have about 40 minutes. We're focusing on the second C, which is conversation. So, this is about how do you create the right content? How do you share it in the right places? So, let's go ahead and get started. Now, one of the first questions that people always ask me is, how do I actually get started with creating content? If you've never done it before or you've done it for a while, but you're trying to figure out how to get to the next level, I'm constantly getting that question. So hopefully we're going to be able to answer that question in a little bit. But it's important to remember a couple of things. And like I said, if you want to let me know what your biggest content creation challenge is in the Q&A, I will try to answer it here in a little bit. But this is extremely important. If you want to create content that resonates with your audience, whether it be social, your newsletter, blog, whatever it is, always remember this acronym. And I'm going to pause for a minute and I'm going to ask you, what does WIIFT stand for? No, it's not WTF, for some of you who are wondering. WIIFT, what does it actually stand for? I think if you can remember this one acronym, everything else should be smooth sailing. So what's in it for them? Meaning, what's in it for your audience? Now, the reason I bring this up is because so many social brands, if you look at their content, you can obviously tell that they're thinking about it from their perspective. We want to sell something. We want you to buy our products or services. But as a consumer, as an audience, do you really care? Probably not. Who do you care about most? We all care about ourselves. So having that mentality in mind will help you filter out the content you create for you versus your audience. So constantly be thinking about what is it for your audience. What are they going to learn? How is this going to entertain them or make them better in their daily lives, their careers? The reason I bring that up is because when you create content only for you, this was a gift here. People were like, ugh, like I do the same old thing over and over and over. So once again, we want to avoid that. We want to understand what's in it for your audience. And with that said, let's start with coming up with ideas. So this is always a big challenge. People always say, what do I create content about, Joe? There's, I don't know where to start. So we're going to go ahead and share a couple quick tips to get you started. One of my favorite places to get started is to talk with your prospects and customers. Now, this seems like common sense, but you'd be surprised at how many marketing teams don't actually speak with their prospects or customers. It's mind-boggling. And what happens when you don't speak with your customers and partners is you create this very, very marketing specific talk that doesn't really align with how your consumers, your audience talk. So you see that in a lot of different brands. There's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of big words that you wouldn't necessarily hear your target audience use when they're searching for you. So once again, it's extremely important to talk with your prospects, talk to your customers. If you can't talk with your prospect and customers on a regular basis, who is the next best departments to speak with? Well, there are two that I can think of. First of which is your sales team. Your sales team are generally on the front lines. They're speaking with prospects on a regular basis to understand why people do and don't buy from you. The second is your customer service team. If you're a large enough organization and you have a customer service team, then they will be very, very frank with you in terms of what are some of the big pet peeves or complaints that consumers have with your brand. It's important to address all of that from a content point of view, whether it's on social. So some brands have leveraged social as a customer support. So I think Fitbit on Twitter has its own customer support, and you can ask them questions. You can get, all your questions resolved there. So think about social as not only a way to sell things, but a way to add value and also make the customer experience better. Another thing that I started to do is poll people on different channels. You can do this on LinkedIn, you can do this on Instagram, you can do this on multiple platforms. But it really gives me a sense in terms of what are some of the topics or challenges that my audience is having. This is extremely important because I know whether or not I should create a specific content piece or create a specific content pillar based on what my audience is asking for. In this example here, I use it to identify which type of events should I be having. So I could talk about a million different things, but obviously, if it's not relevant to my audience, I'm not going to waste my time doing it. So once again, constantly think about what's in it for your audience. Talk to them on a regular basis. Could be online, offline. Could be polling them online is another great way to find out what actually matters to them. Another thing you could do is you can go to different social media groups, and there's tons of social media groups. There's on Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on. And this really gives you an understanding in terms of what are the questions they're having, what are the ways in which they phrase it. The reason this is so great is because it's a gold mine for you. You can better understand what are some of the questions they're having on a particular topic. How can you jump in the conversation and add value? But once again, all of these give you really good insights in terms of what people are asking. And this is really the heart of starting up with good ideas, is really finding out what are your consumers or your audience asking for, and how can you address some of the questions they're having. So, real quick recap, we talked about three different things. First of which is talking to your prospects and customers. That's usually the best source that I always recommend. If you can't do that, talk to sales or customer service teams. Second thing you can do is poll your audience to find out what questions or topics they're interested in. And then finally, look at different social media groups, forums where your audience hang out to find out what are some of the common questions or topics that arise in those specific platforms. So that's coming up with content ideas, speaking with people. Let's talk about using tools because this can help you really accelerate what you're doing. So once again, start with speaking with people in person. Second is you leverage tools. So one of the fastest ways to come up with content ideas is to literally go to Google and leverage the people also ask feature. So if you type in a keyword or question, you can see Google provides a list of different questions around here. And these questions are based on the most common questions that people are asking around that particular keyword. So, for example, what is a cinnamon cookie? You can see how many, calories are in it. Where were the first Girl Scout cookies? What were the first Girl Scout? So it gives you all these ideas in which you could use to create content. Now, caveat here is some of these you may not be able to answer effectively, or they may not be relevant to your business or your brand. So you want to go in and create the list and then filter out with your team which ones are relevant to your business and also to your brand. Another tool that I really, really like is answerthepublic.com. And I know it's a very weird image of this guy in the thumbnail. I think they've changed it recently. But answerthepublic.com is a great tool for understanding what are the common questions your audiences have. So once you plug in a keyword into this search bar right here, it'll give you the most commonly asked questions across different across different search platforms, and it gives you a whole very, very big list. Once again, you may get 200 or 300 questions around who, what, where, when, why, and how. Now, obviously, you can export that list and once again speak with your customers or speak with your team to find out which of these questions is your audience really, really having. Another thing that I really like is Google Trends. So caveat, these are all freemium tools that I'm sharing with you today, so you're welcome to try them out. So Google Trends allows you to understand where are the spikes, so where is the search volume relatively high over a certain period. So once again, this gives you a good sense in terms of seasonality. So for example, Get Fit, you may see a spike at the beginning of the year when everyone is trying to, they have a New Year's resolution of getting fit, getting healthier. So you might see a lot of people, a spike in that in terms of search volume. Versus, a couple months down the road, you could see it kind of tailing off a bit. So once again, this is extremely important to understand more cyclical things, whether it be different, holidays or different, phenomena like this. This gives you a sense in terms of what is the right timing in which I want to use to share my content. All right, so real quick, we talked about some of the tools in which you can try to understand your audience. First of which is, people also ask, Google search, super easy, answer the public, and Google Trends. Now that you have the topics, the second thing you want to do is create valuable content. And for me, creating valuable content is really at the heart right here. It's something that's obviously relevant to your customers, which we talked about just a minute ago. It's something they find interesting, shareable, and followable. And the third bucket is make sure it's going to be tied to your brand or your business. Once again, I see most companies just doing this. Nothing really relevant to customers, nothing that we're going to find interesting, shareable, or followable. It's very much this. So once again, the holy grail is at this centerpiece right here. So there's a couple different ways in which to create viable content. And I'm not going to go through all of these in super detail, but this is a framework that's been used in copywriting. And you can use it in your social media posts too. It's AIDA: attention, interest, desire, and action. So this is a template you could use when you're crafting your own social media post. So we try to use this in ours as well. So here's an example. We try to capture their attention by asking a thought-provoking question. We might lead in so they understand kind of, how is this interesting or relevant to them. We want to spark their desire by digging a bit deeper. And then ultimately, we're going to ask them to take some kind of call to action. Now, the call to action here, caveat once again, is not necessarily buy my products or services, because no one wants to, buy that way. But one thing you could do is ask questions. So if you have a list of, tips you're trying to give away, am I missing anything from this list? Anything that helps them spark a conversation with you. Now let's talk about some of the tools you can create to create valuable content. Because I know a lot of you here, you're saying, look, this sounds great, Joe, but I don't have time to create a lot of this. How can I do it in the fastest, most efficient way possible? Great question, and we're going to answer that right now. So some of you have probably already heard of these tools. These are some of my favorite tools that I use. Canva is a great one. It's a multifaceted one you can use for videos or images. I use it for social media GIFs. I use it for my YouTube thumbnails. So it's great because it's free for the most part. You have so many templates. You have video options now. You have GIF option now. You can pick the aspect ratio depending on the platform. So Canva is really my go-to place when I want to create super quick, super slick looking visuals. Another one that I found a lot of success with is Lumen 5. So Lumen 5 is a great tool if you want to convert your text into videos. So let's say, Joe, I have a bunch of blog posts that I've done. I haven't created any videos out of them, but I'm going to take my most popular blog posts in the past year. I'm going to copy that and paste that into Lumen 5, and it's going to create a series of videos, kind of like a slideshare videos with text overlay and things like that within a few minutes. You can go in and edit the text. You can go in and edit the image, but it's all AI powered, and it's becoming incredibly smart in terms of picking the right keywords and the right words from your specific blog article in this case. Another one of those multifaceted tools, and I think this one is, no, this one's free, freemium again. You can have the watermark at the top. But if you ever see, people adding a lot of captions on videos, why do people add captions on social media? Well, they add that because 80% of people don't actually watch social media videos with the sound on. They watch it with the sound off. That's why if you're putting videos out there, it's important that you have the right subtitles and captions in there. So once again, this is a cool tool in which it auto-generates the transcriptions for you. So all you do is copy and paste that into your platform, into this platform, and it'll auto-generate the captions for you. Now, obviously, you can go in and edit it if you don't think it's picked the right words. But once again, these tools are getting smarter and smarter. So they're doing a lot of the legwork for you. So real quick, some of the tools that we talked about are Canva, creating slick visuals, Lumen 5, which converts text to videos, and Kapwing, which does a whole lot of different things, one of which is creating captions for your online videos. Now, another thing people always ask me, so we talked about how to come up with content ideas. We talked about how to create it using different tools. The third thing people always ask me is, where do I share the content? Which is a really great question, because if you're creating content and you don't share it in the right places, it's not going to have the impact that you want. So once again, where should I be posting? And my answer is always go where your audience is. If you don't know where your audience spends time online or in social media, ask them. So, for example, I poll my clients, my prospects to find out what specific social media channels are they spending more time on, what media are they reading. That way, I know the kind of style they like, as well as where I could potentially feature the content that I'm sharing. So, if you don't know, once again, go back, poll your audience, ask them to find out where they spend time. Now, I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but it's important to understand that different social media platforms have different demographics. We use different platforms differently. So, the way I would use LinkedIn versus Facebook is going to be very, very different. So, don't try to copy and paste the same content across all your platforms. You probably want to tweak it a little bit, whether it's the duration of the video, whether it is the tone and style. You want to tweak it slightly depending on the specific audience because the platform because the audience is consuming it in a different way there. So let's quickly showcase a couple of examples here. So one of my favorite brands when it comes to LinkedIn is Think with Google, and Think with Google does an incredible job of showcasing these very short, bite-sized stats because they have access to all this data and all this information. They feature it in a very simple manner, and I think it breaks away from what a lot of brands do. Is they try to inundate you with all these stats, all these text on a post, and you have to remember that people are just scrolling through on their phones. So they're not going to stop and read an entire novel that you wrote, particularly on one image with very small text. So once again, as you can see, they have a very simple graphic, um, one stat, and then a simple description about it. That's it. So once again, if you're scanning through, super easy. Another thing they do very well, probably better than any brand I'd see on LinkedIn, is consistency. So if you scroll through Think with Google's post, they almost all have the same style in terms of the colors, in terms of the graphics. And this is extremely important in terms of recall, in terms of your branding. So Think with Google, I think, does an extremely good job. If you're looking for inspiration on LinkedIn, do check out them because they do a really, really good job. Let's highlight some of the things. So once you talk about a clean, simple, um, thought-provoking stat, but once again, there's always room for improvement. So for me, the intro text is a bit chunky. I would probably cut it down into shorter sentences, shorter paragraphs. The easier you can make it for your audience to skim, the better. And another thing that I see individuals, but not so much brands doing, is adding the links in the comments themselves rather than the copy. And people always ask me, why do brands do that? So think about it. If you're a social media platform, you do not want your audience to leave. You want them to stay as long as possible because that way you can sell more ads. I don't know if there's anyone from social media platforms out here, but it's generally the way most social media brands operate is they to generate off of ad revenue. So obviously they want you to stay as long as possible on the platform itself. Let's look at an example from Facebook. So this is Apple, and I think it's very much true in Apple spirit. It's very simple, very elegant. It's very to the point. But let's see how we could potentially improve or what are some of the key learnings from this. So they use actual images instead of stock photos. This is kind of a big pet peeve for me. I know it's very, very easy to use stock photos, but the challenge with stock photos over time is that you see the same brands in the same space using them, particularly in the tech space. You might see the same visual across multiple brands. So eventually, you probably want to invest in taking photos of your customers or your products or services or even your team as a way to stand out. And I think obviously Apple has a plethora of unique images they can pull from. Another thing they've created is their own relevant hashtags. So in this case, it's behind the Mac. So if you're typing that, you can follow all the different series behind that. Same feedback as previously. This is slightly better, slightly shorter. But once again, I would probably break it up into smaller sentences, add a space between it, just so it's easier to scan. Let's see what else we have here. Let's look at Instagram. So this is one from Amazon. And once again, it breaks away from, I think, everything we talked about. It's, there's nothing stock photo about this. This is actually user generated. So let's talk about some of the things that we like about this post. So one thing they do is inject humor into the post. So this is something that I don't think enough B2B brands do, but I think this is a beautiful example of someone who has taken user-generated content. So this is someone, either a fan or an employee, has taken this very humorous post. They've actually reshared it, put a little bit of description around it. So for me, it's very compelling because it's not something you would see ordinarily. It's quite humorous, and it's a real photo from real people. So people tend to resonate with that a little bit more. All right. So real quick, some of the key takeaways that we talked about, because I want to leave as much time for Q&A as possible, is before you post, ask yourself what's in it for them. If you can't answer that question, then don't bother even putting it out, because it's not going to add any value to what you're doing. Next thing you want to do is deciding on where to put it. So obviously you want to ask your audience. You want to find out where they're spending any time. Another thing we didn't talk about, which I've included in here, is you can leverage different tools to make sure you're sharing content across a different platform. So if you're using tools like Hootsuite or Buffer, you can schedule it out. So you no longer have to, every day manually go in and say, all right, Facebook, click share this, Twitter, share this. You can schedule it one time. You can pick which platforms it is for, and you can schedule it that way. So once again, I want to make sure if there's any questions you guys are having, please do let me know in the Q&A portion right here. Let's see. Otherwise, like I said, if there are any questions, comments, connected with me on LinkedIn, happy to chat. Let's see. All right. Well, like I said, I hopefully you have found today's session helpful in any way. I'd love to hear if you're trying out any of these tools in the Q&A. Ah, cool. So we have a question from Joyce. Joyce says, you mentioned polling your audience to ask where they are, but if you ask on Facebook, they'll be on Facebook. If you ask on Instagram, they'll be on Instagram. Doesn't it defeat the purpose? Very, very good question, Joyce, and something I hadn't thought about. And you might want to put, when you're posing the question, in addition to Facebook, where else do you spend time? So if you're running a Facebook poll, you say, in addition to Facebook, where else do you spend time online? Is it Instagram? Is it LinkedIn? Is it TikTok? Is it Reddit? Is it, what are the platforms do you spend more time on? Because yes, if you ask them on that platform, do they spend time on Instagram or Facebook? They're going to say yes, because they're already on that platform. But you want to find out, in addition to that, where else are they spending their time? And so I use this for different social media platforms. I use this for different media. So are they reading the Wall Street Journal, or are they reading things like Business Times, Harvard Business Review? That'll also give you a sense in terms of what kind of style they like. Do they like long form thought leadership? Do they like short, punchy copy? What are some of the things that interest them? So very, very good question, Joyce. We have a little bit more time, so if anyone has any more questions. I'm curious to hear, we can see if anyone is running polls currently. I'd love to see if you guys are running it on any particular platforms at the moment. All right. Well, like I said, if there are no other questions, then we will wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining today's session. Like I said, if you have any more questions after this, connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to answer them. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of today's session. I'm sure it's going to be very, very exciting and full of a lot of practical tips for you guys. So take care, and I will see you guys next time.